Right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Trade Trade Group, and this is your end of recap for Tuesday, the 18th of July. Let's get right into the price action. Before we do, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. The full risk disclaimer is right there. So a couple big themes of the day, and you could see based on what I've got listed here in the spreadsheet, a lot of green on the screen. Once again, SPYs finished up 70 basis points. The Qs finished up a little bit more. How about the Dow today? The diamonds up 1%. That's something different. We really haven't seen too much big price action out of the 30 Dow components in terms of the price weighting there, which I will get to. But really nice performance, up 1.1%. The small caps as well had some big numbers today, up 1.3%. So as I mentioned, a lot of green on the screen. We do have this week monthly options expiration, which could be driving things a little bit, as well as a VIX expiration. Could be why that there was such a big MOC imbalance for the day. I think it was at one point around $4.2 billion. So it feels like there was something systematic, some systematic buying today that was kind of fueling just as it did yesterday. So also, theme of the day, I've got, really what was interesting today, I thought, was the move in the banks today. They are typically, not something that's really that exciting on earnings. But as always, what's most important with some of these earnings reports is what they say in the conference call, some of the comments that they make. And James Gorman over at Morgan Stanley mentioned that, hey, perhaps the worst is behind them. Remember, if you kind of rewind, I don't know, about 6 months ago, and some of the tech earnings that we heard, that kind of rhymes a little bit, because I think that was something of the effect of what we heard with those tech earnings months and months ago about, hey, maybe the worst is kind of behind us. And when you have something like that, and when you're looking at, this is the regional banking ETF, this is the first move, and again, I think what's kind of becoming kind of an obvious looking pattern at this point is perhaps an inverted head and shoulders that's happening here. Remember, this really, even though this was up 4.2%, right? This is back basically in the middle of March, where the banks have been here. So this is regional banks. Of course, if you want to look at XLF, which is a little bit more of everything, there's also insurance companies in there. That looks like a different chart to me. Also, if you want to look at what's called capital markets, there's an ETF, and it's an interesting set of components that are in here. But this is actually in an uptrend, and actually looks a bit different. So, if you don't want to go, because I'm a trend trader, and I don't buy things that are in downtrends for the most part. Every once in a while I'll make an exception, and I could give myself every once in a while one name that I might try in a downtrend. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, because I'm usually in and out of those names pretty quickly. But for the most part, I stick to uptrends, and I like the KCE chart a little bit better. But again, for a trade, risk to reward, maybe this season moved back up to the 200-day moving average. Let me talk a little bit about the indices and some levels to watch here. We'll also talk about the Microsoft announcement too. But yes, we are coming upon another level. I mean, it's been pretty crazy, because the levels, a couple levels that I've been talking about in these end of day videos, as well as in the trading room, in the Qs and in IWM, price has been able to surpass some of these levels. So S&P, the level that I've been sending out, like on Substack as well, this 45.97 level, again, a logical place for pause. So we'll see if that happens. Again, I'm not making a prediction, but it's a logical place, right? Using volume at price, this 45.97.5 level is definitely a level that I will be watching. Qs, we'll talk about the Qs just for a second here, but here was the version point of control takeout. I think this was on Thursday of last week, right? And that has made a decent move above there. So what I generally look for when we come upon one of these virgin point of controls, because it is a level of where buyers and sellers are going to fight it out a little bit, right, over where there's overhead supply, is whether or not we lose the short-term trend. So for example, price has been above, has broken out of the value area, right? That's always, in my opinion, a good thing if you're bullish. And since then, we did see a tiny bit of a pause in Friday's price action, but the price has not stayed, has not broken the 5-period moving average. So it's the same thing. Sometimes you could see a really ugly looking candle for the day or bar, and you're like, oh, that's a reversal bar. If in my opinion, if you don't lose the trend at all, then it doesn't really matter. Even if it's an ugly looking, bar for the day or candle for the day. Remember, one day is not a pattern, right? 3 days usually, makes a pattern when you're looking at technicals. So that's where we are. And then I want to talk about IWM, because IWM spent just a couple days consolidating too, right? It kind of looks a little bit like this the last time that we took one of these out. And we are now coming upon some resistance on the weekly chart, right? So we've got some big levels to watch, because I'm going to talk about the Dow in just a second too. But this is the level, right? You've heard me for a couple weeks now, maybe even longer, say, hey, I don't really like the IWM because it's in value versus the S&P or the NASDAQ have been trending above their value area. For example, if you want to look at the Qs here, right? This was the breakout of value area that we saw all the way back in May. Same thing with the S&P, which has been trending, but IWM, right, has been the laggard, but has been trying to catch up a little bit. So we still have 3 more days of the week, and I would watch what we see here at 195.87. Remember, this is where we got to in the beginning of the year. This is right at the end of January, and we stalled, and IWM basically spent a good couple of months, consolidating after that push back lower, right? So this 195.87 is going to be important. And then interesting, 2 areas that really have nothing to do with one another: small caps and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which again is only 30 stocks. But look at where this is. I went through this weekend and I posted the 5 largest names of the Dow, because again, the Dow is a price weighted index, right? I'll show you the components of the index. Let me just bring this up here, right? And what that means is that if you're not familiar with that term, price weighted index, it means whatever name has the largest. So first of all the names get the exact same position, right? So it doesn't matter if you're 3M or IBM or United Healthcare, you get the same shares in the index. So what makes you a larger weight is price, and that's what's kind of confusing a little bit, because it's different than a market cap weighted or an equally weighted index. Every name gets the same exact amount of shares, but some names have higher shares and therefore are going to get a bigger weight. So for example, UNH just is the highest price stock, so therefore it's 9% of the ETF. Microsoft is next at 6.6, Goldman, Home Depot, McDonald's. So first, I look at the price of the index, and 349.36. And again, this was a nice move, and a nice move so far this week. So we're going to be testing that resistance level. So, this could be, again, because if you look at this from where this has started for the year, right? Of course, there was a dip down here, and this held nicely 314. But where we started the year, maybe this could be the time that the Dow stocks really emerge here. And if we go through those 5 names now, one of the ones that I was really worried about was UNH, and UNH had good earnings and has had some nice follow through this week, right? And has managed to stay, because this is where we closed on Friday, just a few days ago, and look at the move since then. So UNH has made a real nice kick save. Microsoft, which we'll talk about next, is a completely different story, and this name is going to report next week. But one heck of a move to get past highs and to come out to all-time highs, and so that's the second largest weight. And we can kind of talk a little bit about this. They announced a new AI. They're calling it an AI tool, right? Called the Microsoft 365 Copilot, which will cost $30 per month. of what most business customers already pay. So, this kind of got the whole group to get going again, the whole AI group. NVIDIA started to rally on this. Palantir saw a lot of call buying. Up and down the line of SMCI had another big day, right? So it's interesting that while this may not exactly be a direct move, I mean, this SMCI move has been tremendous. I'm still long a very small piece of this in my TTG trend portfolio. Really impressive. Now pretty overbought. I mean, another huge move up 5.4%. Since this name, you go back, to where it was back in here in the beginning of the month, kind of hesitating and consolidating, it's basically just been a very strong move. And then of course, NVIDIA, also moving nicely and gliding up here, also above the 5-day moving average. It did not take out the highs from what we've seen on Friday, the intraday highs, but this was a new closing high for NVIDIA. So again, that's the that's the trend. And right now, still, when you hear AI, these names are still going up, right? So I think eventually, right, to kind of find out if this AI theme has legs to it, eventually, and I don't know when this happens, but when you hear of a new artificial intelligence product being launched, and if the names don't go up, then that maybe that it's priced in and maybe the move is getting mature. But for now, that's not what we're seeing. As soon as somebody launches something new AI, these stocks are still as a group rallying higher. So just an observation that I wanted to mention. And if we go back to the Microsoft chart and looking at the daily, I was actually long this last week, and I sold it once it hit this resistance. So shame on me, because I had held it through. I had actually went long here. I held it through here. I think I added a little bit in here. Got it to be a nice profitable trade, but look at the volume on this. So maybe this kind of continues to, I think it has a possibility of continuing to run into its earnings report. Very impressive. Just a couple other names too that we could go through, but obviously it's a lot of growth names that are really catching. MDB was a name that I went long on the open. Speaking of Microsoft, they're pretty busy. Besides that announcement that they had, MDB and Microsoft have a strategic alliance. Also, Teladoc also announced that too. So MDB did make it out to new highs, right? This has been a little bit of a difficult type move because this is a high price stock and it's not exactly easy to trade, but I took advantage of this today. I just thought maybe it's going to turn the corner. I also, if you look at the weekly chart, it kind of smooths things out a little bit, and you could see that the trend, longer term trend looks pretty strong here. And it did come in and tested that top of value, held at 381. So I'm still holding a piece of this, even though I took multiple targets in this. Tesla, I sold out of my last piece of this in my trading account. I'm going to hold a piece through earnings, but I just felt like with everything going up, and we do have earnings tomorrow after the close. It may rally another day, but this did very well for me since I added it just about a week ago once we started to turn higher, right? I think right on this candle here is where I added it back in my trading account. Again, I have it in the TTG trend portfolio because ultimately my price target for the year is up at 320. I don't know if that's what they're going to say on earnings. And I wouldn't mind if there is some volatility. And this is the way also I think important here to kind of think about earnings is that you may get some chances to kind of add things on a little bit of a dip. I wouldn't mind if that happens in something like a Tesla, because a lot of names have really been running into their earnings. Netflix finally turned the corner today. I was actually looking for this last week, and lo and behold, tomorrow, of course, they report earnings after the close, but you got this nice move kind of making up for this not really doing too much so far this month, and a real nice move. This was on our watch list to start the week. Here's what we put together a watch list every week. I showed this my watch list from last week. I change this around every week. on Sundays going into Monday, we put together a new watch list, and you could see it's doing quite well again. So here's Netflix was on the top of the list. I said I was looking for a run into earnings. Unfortunately, I didn't catch this one, but it did work pretty well. Palantir made our watch list, was a carryover from the previous week. That name is also up 6.6%. And then I added a couple things, Deere, I know this is not in the headlines today, but a lot of the agriculture names really got going today too. This is a nice break. I put this in my Substack report this morning, because if you look at the weekly chart, this is a nice play on ag, which a lot of those stocks got going today, agriculture. So real nice move, and that was in our watch list and made a very nice move. DOCN, which I traded this one yesterday, it had some follow through today. ACLS, the semiconductor group, which I talked about already, NVIDIA. But if you look at the whole group here, right, this is also out to new highs. So that's also really impressive, right? And the trend looks great here, right? Trending above, it almost looks like the NVIDIA chart, which it should. Resemble it a little bit because it's a larger weight in the SMH ETF, but this is also gliding higher like this, so this is pretty good. I talked about I gave a little bit of an acronym, I guess, or nickname to ACLS. So I call these the A team. These smaller semiconductor companies, ACLH, AEHR. Had an inside day today, down 3%. That's perfectly fine for the move it's made. And then ALGM, which also popped out to new highs. I want to go back to this ALCS chart just for a second. So anyway, that's the A team of the semiconductors. But I mentioned to members today that it was having an inside day today, and could have maybe taken advantage of that today. It still finished down on the day, but only down fractionally. So I think the trend looks great here. If you want a little bit of diversification, you could also just go along the SMH, because that also looks like a similar looking chart, right, to those. So semi's very, very strong right now. All right, so just to kind of round out a couple things, and also Lemonade, which I put that on the watch list yesterday. A couple other things I already mentioned, MDB, but I like these, the heat, we keep hearing about that around the country, and I think a nice little play, which I added. It didn't really do much today. Other names were hot today, or hotter, I should say, than maybe the weather. But Generac looks pretty good here if it kind of maintain. It didn't close on the highs. It may need to fall a little bit further back into the 20-day moving average, but ultimately I like the long-term, the basing that we're seeing in Generac. Also, JCI was a name that I added today. Again, didn't have any momentum today. That's okay. But I like the trend going on here too. And the fact that this is a play more on like HVAC and those types of things, which people are going to want to have air conditioning at this time. So and I know if air conditioning if you need a repair, you're probably calling these people, as well as Carrier's another company too, to kind of watch in the space. So that's it for today's video, guys. Clearly a lot of strength on the tape. I would just be mindful of that we're going to be hitting some S&P resistance, and also that you've got options expiration this week. So I think, again, if you're kind of prepared for this a little bit, if you've been taking profits along the way, a little bit of downside volatility may not necessarily be a bad thing at this point. All right, guys, that's it for today's recap. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.